I hope everyone is keeping their sanity. I know I can seem calm as a dream priest, but there is still too much to know. Franklin is close to pulling a few of you for extra investigation to discover who sent us those transmissions. Until then, I wanted to think about who our friends are, who we're fighting for, besides a chance to escape the void and for you to get back to your own time and space on Earth. We thought we were fighting Obsitans Abysus with the Order of Light and the Elders. It seems like the Order of Light is really just a means for the Elders to get what they want. Their lack of respect and care for us shakes our core. But are we alone? My real parents mentioned the Elders are just a group, not a race, and that there was a second group. My father said I needed to discover the survivors of the Elder Uprising to unlock my blood. I assume this means gaining the power to open portals, which is obviously good news for us all. But we need to know who this group is. I asked the Queen of the Aes Sídhe if there's knowledge of the Elder Uprising. The Queen is ready to show us what she knows. Listen.
I do not know everything, but combing through your dreams while my energy resides here, I picked up the message your parents sent you. Locked away inside it is a map of their journey. Breadcrumbs they must have left in the hopes you found it. It's difficult to discover. You certainly are not powerful enough to do so on your own, but it sounds like your elder blood means you might be able to learn more. My powers are limited too, but there are some keys of the timeline I think will help us understand who the elders are and how they seize power. The Master Realm, home to a peaceful race of beings, united together to preserve the beauty of the world. This realm is interesting in that it consists of just 3 planets rotating around a blue star. I can teach more about this later, but all 3 planets thrived with life. And 10 distinct races of beings existed on these rotating rocks. But before all other dimensions and worlds came to be, the Master Realm was a bubble with an endless void surrounding it. The beings knew it existed but never dared to attempt to reach it. That is until the Elders came to be. It all started when an accident caused a leak from the void. This is the first time Obsitans Abysus escaped. The hive mind of shadows, hell-bent on chaos and destruction. The beings came together to seal the leak, but a part of Obsitans Abysus remained. The shadows could corrupt and possess, which led to the spread of its darkness, and suddenly, more leaks from the void. The races feuded as they tried to come up with a solution. 5 of them believed the best way to fight the shadows was to open up the void further, force them back. The other half of the beings thought they needed to outsmart the shadows and starve them of chaos by simply continuing to enjoy the beauty of the world as they had been. Their belief said that creating more chaos from opening up the void further would only strengthen Obsitans Abysus. Looked at as being weak, a great uprising began. One group called themselves the Elders, to signify an all-knowing race. The other group called themselves the Overseers. The Overseers wanted to just be in the moment as the world intended. They believe the world exists to be enjoyed as is. You have to take the highs and lows as they come. This is why they believe the shadows would not survive for long if the bait wasn't taken. The uprising went on for generations, until the Elders decided they would seize power by just opening up the void further, without the intervention of the Overseers. When they did this, a great storm rushed the land as the void split and cracked. The bubble they lived in burst and leaked into the gaps between their world and the void. This started to create the other realms. Many of the Overseers were slaughtered by horrors that came from the void, and as chaos spread and the other realms grew, the shadows were drawn out of the Master Realm. This allowed the Elders to take control completely. They sentenced the surviving Overseers to exile and kicked them out of their realm, sealing them away. The Elders soon realized they hadn't beaten the shadows, but only distracted them. They would return and finish the job to take control of their world, so they began to recruit beings in these other worlds in the hopes of stalling them as they worked to seal their world off again. The problem? The void stretched and split too much. The other worlds continued to expand and grow. No matter what the Elders did, nothing could fully seal them away from Obsitans Abysus. So they continued to build the Order of Light, to work toward another planet, What this plan is, I do not know, but one thing is for certain. The Elders will do whatever it takes to get it done, even if it means the death of all members of the Order of Light.
Welcome to the quest for the Green Ball, lost in dreamlands, and welcome to the playoffs! Playoffs? You talking about playoffs? Yes, I'm talking about playoffs. One of the hardest things to do in fantasy football is survive the gauntlet regular season and get into this tournament. Now, anything can happen. Records are thrown out the window and matchups become king as 6 of us battle to claim the Green Bowl championship. This is actually our 10th season as a league, and this year's field is filled with some familiar faces. 2-time champion Loki Lebowski Thor, former champions Risky Business and Remember the Titans, former Green Bowl runner-ups More Than Conquerors and My Minerva's Minions, and there's one newbie too, with Founders making the playoffs in their first career league season. Something that happens more often than you think in this league, actually. So let's get the party started by discussing the quarterfinals! First up, we get the European Void Division champion, number 3 Minerva's Minions, my Minions, hosting number 6 More Than Conquerors in Rome 1890, and of course More Than Conquerors wants some revenge after the tiebreakers. He probably feels robbed him of that division title, so we'll see what happens. I mean, we get to settle it here, right? Rome 1890, let's check it out. This is the rubber match in the season series for these division rivals, me and More Than Conquerors, and one that I think will truly tell us who the division champion really is after all those crazy tiebreakers. You know, tiebreakers might have given it to my Minions, but whoever wins here is going to say their season was more successful. You know, that's it. You know, the division title doesn't mean anything if you lose this match. The 2 matches between us this season have been blowouts, so who knows where this one's going. You know, if it matters, my Minions are 5-2 at home this season. More Than Conquerors is 6-1 on the road, so something has to give there. My Minions lost 124.44 to 68.66 back in week 2, but we won 131.36 to 66.44 in week 12. Of course, the computers see this as a close battle right now. More Than Conquerors has a 54% chance to win. So how do we break down a playoff match where the 6th seed is coming in with a slight chance to win?
We got to begin with the star players and then go to the players to watch. But we're going to start with the star players first. These are the guys with beast potential to turn projections on their head. For this 6th seed here, I'm going with Joe Mixon, clearly the star on this squad, acquired in a trade with the Stellar Bitches in Week 7. That's a clear steal at this point, let's be honest. Jordan Mason's on IR. Juju Smith-Schuster is not a viable starter in fantasy, really. Mixon has 3 20-plus point games and 1 30-plus point game this season. He also has double-digit points in 8 of 10 games. He's been healthy, missing weeks 3 to 5 with an injury. Of course, one of Mixon's single-digit games came in Week 12. The other, surprisingly, came in Week 2, though he wasn't on More Than Conqueror's squad in that victory. So I guess this means that Mixon's performance will be a key indicator in how More Than Conqueror's does, right? Probably not. These cases are always filled with variables, but it must be noted, of course. He gets Miami this week. Miami's allowed 12 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns to running backs this season, but they've only allowed 4 total touchdowns to the position since Week 9. This coincides with the return of Tua Tagovailoa and a Miami offense that's been in more shootouts than they were previously. They also haven't allowed a 100-yard rushing game to a lead back all season. That's kind of nuts. It must be noted that James Cook was the best back they played so far, though. So Joe Mixon is probably the best back altogether. For my minions, the star is obviously 4th overall pick, Saquon Barkley. You know, the man's a beast. He's a maniac. He's not perfect, though. He has had over 40 points once, over 30 points twice, over 20 points twice, and has double-digit points in 11 of 13 games this season. He had 49.2 points in Week 12 in that blowout I was talking about. Was held to just 13.6 points in the Week 2 loss, though. He does get the Steelers' defense in Week 15, the only running back to get over 100 yards on the ground against the Steelers. Tyrone Tracy, the Giants, Barkley's former team, that was in Week 8. They allowed just 78.85 yards on the ground. This is clearly the toughest matchup Barkley will be in all season. However, the Steelers have allowed 11 rushing touchdowns on the ground, including 7 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 games. So I don't know what's going on with the Steelers, but they're giving up a lot of scores on the ground lately. So unless Jalen Hurts vultures TDs with the tush push, Barkley could see plenty of opportunities inside the 10. And while the stars are obviously the money makers in playoff time and fantasy, a compliment to the stars is just as important. So who are the players to watch here? Well, for More Than Conquerors, I look to quarterback Kyler Murray. This was another player acquired by trade before the season started, and he beasted for 35.54 points in the Week 2 win for them, but had just 10.3 points in the Week 12 loss to my minions. More Than Conquerors, though, is 5-1 when Kyler Murray scores over 20 points this season. The only loss came against Remember the Titans in Week 7. The Patriots' defense is not very good either, allowing 10 passing touchdowns in their last 3 games and 22 total passing touchdowns this season. They do not give up a lot of passing yards with 227 allowed per game, but that's really because they also stink at stopping the run. You know, and that could also bode well for Murray unless James Conner gets all the touchdowns. They haven't allowed a lot of rushing yards and scores to quarterbacks, but Murray's a different guy. Murray's had 40 yards rushing in 6 games this season. He also has 4 rushing scores. For the minions, I'm looking at another quarterback, Kirk Cousins. Cousins is a streamer backup at best when looking at overall numbers, especially lately. He's been pretty bad. He has no passing touchdowns and 8 interceptions in his last 4 games. That doesn't scream playoff winner, right? However, Cousins has played very tough defenses with New Orleans, Denver, the Chargers, and the Vikings in the last 4 weeks. And he's a streamer backup, right? So it's almost to be expected that he'd struggle. He did have over 300 yards passing against the Saints and Vikings, so that's obviously good. And the Falcons did score points. They just all came by rushing touchdowns, so it kind of went against Cousins in that aspect. But when we look at the plus matchups this season, we're talking about the good ones. Cousins has done well usually. You know, he lit up Tampa Bay twice, for instance. Those were his best games. And he does get one of those plus matchups in Week 15 against Las Vegas. The Raiders are 25th against quarterbacks, allowing 24 passing touchdowns, including 16 in the past 6 games. Only Patrick Mahomes was held to just 1 touchdown, and he still had over 300 yards in that game. The Raiders did pick off Baker Mayfield twice last week, but they have just 7 overall interceptions as a team in 2024. The real problem the Raiders could give is Max Crosby in the pass rush, but again, if the Falcons are running it well, it might have Crosby not, rush the passer as much. If there's ever a time for Cousins to shine, it seems to be Week 15. The rest of the matchup depends on the health of the Minions, who still might need a miracle if Kenneth Walker and or Bucky Irving are out still. More Than Conquerors will hope that Patrick Taylor can replace Isaac Guerrero if Guerrero cannot play on Thursday, which is looking likely at the moment. Amon-Ra St. Brown versus David Montgomery. Terry McLaurin versus CeeDee Lamb. David Njoku versus Travis Kelce. Younghoe Koo versus Cameron Dicker. And the Chiefs versus Vikings defense battles are all capable of being the true keys to a win. Those are the matchups with players close in the rest of the season rankings. My opinion says that the defensive battle and Scary Terry versus Lamb are the other top spots to possibly flip these projections. Of course, that's just one quarterfinal. Let's move on to the other quarterfinal as number 4 Pounders hosts number 5 Loki Lebowski Thor in Beijing 31-45. This will be the second time these two teams go at it, with Loki Lebowski Thor winning 124.86 to 102.74 back in Week 11 during Lebowski Thor's current 7-game winning streak. If it matters, Pounders is 5-2 at home this season. Lebowski Thor is 4-3 on the road, so something has to give again. Pounders comes in with 3 losses in his last 4 weeks. None of that matters here. I mean, this is a new time. It's playoff time. Still, Lebowski Thor is being given a 57% chance to win in these early projections. A lot of that is based on the health of Breece Hall, who may miss another game. It also hinges on the health of Kenneth Walker, with Lebowski Thor currently going with Zach Charbonnet in his flex position. But in another close projection, we should look at the 2 stars of the team, which is actually not that easy here. I mean, for Lebowski Thor, it's rare that, again, we don't see a true star on a playoff team in fantasy football. But when you look at his lineup, Alvin Kamara fits the mold the most, it looks like. Kamara did drop 42 points in Week 2 and also had a game with over 20 points in Week 9. Kamara has had double-digit points in all but 4 games this season, so he's been one of the solid players on Lebowski Thor. But he hasn't scored a touchdown since Week 6. And now Kendrick Miller is vulturing them, even with Taysom Hill on IR. That can be concerning for Lebowski Thor, but again, we know Kamara is capable of a big game, and with Derek Carr out, it actually could mean Kamara's the entire offense, along with Miller. So Miller vulturing might not be as bad if Kamara's just getting all the checkdowns, bunch of runs. Even if they stack the box, Kamara's usually really good after contact. So unless the Saints score 0 points, you can expect touchdown opportunities for both running backs and maybe some tight ends in this matchup. Obviously helps Kamara. Kamara goes up against the Washington defense this week, which has allowed 11 touchdowns of running backs on the ground, but 0 through the air. They allowed a running back to get over 100 yards on the ground 3 times. They allow 114 yards per game to the position, over 4 yards per carry. Also good for Kamara. Now we got to look at Pounders. Who's his star? Well, he's got a maniac in the quarterback position, Josh Allen. I mean, come on. Allen just had the 2nd best weekly score in league history, 58.88 points. That's absolutely bonkers. He has 32 total touchdowns now after getting 3 passing and 3 rushing scores last week. Now, again, Pounders can pivot to other quarterbacks. He's got Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels on his bench, which is absolutely insane. But it is really tough to sit a guy who nearly dropped 60 points and a guy that's playing his best football of the year right now. But we'll see. I mean, Pounders could do whatever he wants to do. I'm still highlighting Allen here because he's closing in on a 3,000 passing yard and 500 rushing yard season. And again, second best weekly score in our league history. You know, one thing that must be mentioned, though, the Lions defense is who Allen goes up against this week. They are 5th best against quarterbacks in fantasy football, which is actually surprising. I mean, you look at the Lions defense, they really look that amazing. I actually think it's more about the game script and who the Lions have played. You know, it must be said they have allowed just 11 passing touchdowns and do have 14 interceptions this season, so they've made some plays when they needed to. Matthew Stafford and Geno Smith are the only quarterbacks to get over 300 yards passing against them as well. But again, Josh Allen uses his legs more than any other quarterback they've played, really. So I think Allen is one of those matchup-proof guys where it doesn't really matter who he's playing, you know, unless it's a snow game, obviously. But then he could still rush in for touchdowns like we saw. You know, they allowed just 2 rushing scores to quarterbacks. Again, Josh Allen is a different breed. And in a matchup that means so much to both teams in the NFL, the number 1 seed first round bye in the NFL playoffs on the line and for both teams in their conferences, I actually see this one as being a shootout, especially with how bad the Bills' defense could be at times, and that also favors Allen. But there are players to watch, of course, in this matchup. For Lebowski Thor, I actually turned to a defense. I don't think they've done that all year. He's got the Denver Broncos defense. This is a huge spot this week and probably the best matchup Lebowski Thor has going up against the Colts and an inaccurate quarterback that's essentially a rookie. Denver has 49 sacks, 12 interceptions, 6 fumble recoveries, and 4 total touchdowns this season. They allowed less than 20 points 9 times and less than 14 points 4 times this season. The Colts do have Jonathan Taylor, but Denver allowed 5 rushing touchdowns to running backs this season. Just 5. They have allowed 5 passing scores too, but it's more likely that Richardson tries to run if Taylor fails. Kenneth Walker and Derrick Henry are the only other backs to get over 100 yards on the ground against the Broncos this season. If any defense can drop over 20 points this week, it looks like it could be Denver. So what about Pounders? Yeah, I'm looking at running back James Conner. We've actually featured him on a player to watch once before. Conner has 9 double-digit games this season, but has lacked touchdowns of late, with just 3 since week 8. But he gets to go up against a Patriots defense this week. Conner has not reached 100 rushing yards since week 9. The Patriots might change those fortunes. The Patriots allow 111 yards per game to the position and have allowed 10 touchdowns on the ground and 4 through the air to running backs. They surprisingly only allowed 4 backs to reach 100 yards on the ground this year, though. But they also have to watch out for Kyler Murray. They surprisingly only allowed 4 backs to reach 100 yards on the ground this year, but they also have to watch out for Kyler Murray runs, which should open up the box for James Conner to go between the tackles. Another surprise is that the Patriots have allowed 0 rushing touchdowns since week 9. They've allowed 3 passing touchdowns to backs in the last 2 weeks combined, though, so there's always that possibility. And if Breece Hall is out, Pounders will be hoping Conner makes up some slack this week. Now, the rest of the matchup has some key areas that could end up being the difference, too. Lebowski Thor needs Jalen Hurts to survive a tough Steelers team to go up against Allen. Pounders needs the Colts defense to step up against Denver. Chase Brown versus James Cook. Tyreek Hill versus Jackson Smith and Jigba. DeAndre Hopkins versus Xavier Worthy. Brock Bowers versus Pat Freiermuth. And Jake Bates versus Blake Grupe are the other potential matchups that can make something happen. As I'm looking at these, I think the Chase Brown versus James Cook and the Brock Bowers versus Pat Freiermuth spots could be the other ones that end up leading either team to a win. Now, the championship bracket is what everyone cares about, but there are things to play for in the consolation bracket, including 2025 draft position. Let's look at the consolation quarterfinals in the best of the rest. We get the Overcomers traveling to Barcelona in 1992 to take on the Clash at Demon Head. Both these teams were 5-9 this season. And of course, this is a 50-50 matchup at the moment. The Clash at Demon Head defeated the Overcomers 131.66 to 106.5 in Week 4. And that seems like years ago now. CJ Stroud versus Jordan Love, Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones versus Jonathan Taylor and Brian Robinson, and Garrett Wilson versus Cooper Kupp look to be the key spots here. In the other consolation quarterfinal, Green Acres hosts Air Jordan in Tokyo 1981. Both of these teams were 5-9 as well. Green Acres defeated Air Jordan 105.5 to 65.08 in Week 11. Green Acres enters with a 70% chance to win. Aaron Rodgers versus Caleb Williams or Bo Nix, Rashad White versus Rico Dowdle, and Jordan Addison versus Puka Nacua will most likely be the differences in this one. Here we are, just 3 weeks before we crown a 2024 Green Bowl champion. Every play, every game, every injury, every point is going to be scrutinized. This is fun. It could be heartbreaking to see it all come to an end, obviously. Two teams get to relax a bit with their first round buys. Risky business. Remember the Titans. But even they have to worry about injuries in Week 15. And the league was tight this season with close matches between all these playoff teams. Yeah, I mean, check out these final standings. The European Void was insane. The first ever three-way tie record-wise in a division to close it out, with tiebreakers determining the seeding in the playoffs and the eventual champion. Remember, the Titans dominated the American Void, but the others were all close in the division. The Asia Pacific Void had two of the best teams in the league this season, and the Elite Mother Tuckers were a tough out as well. Pounders lost twice to them, for instance. You know, overall, the top six ended up being pretty clear, with only the Elite Mother Tuckers being within a few games of the wild cards. But now all that's thrown out the window. Everyone is 0-0 again, and anything can happen. That's the show for the week. Hope you enjoyed it. We only have 6 episodes to go. Can you believe it? Man, these seasons fly by, but these next 3 weeks are going to be nuts. It's playoff time. Before you leave, let's check out that playoff bracket, just so that, you could get the feel for it. The teams that are in it, you can start to feel that energy, that excitement. Until next time, salut.